I'm Marcus Smith, and this is Constant Wonder. Join us as we quest for the awe and wonder of knowing we are part of something infinitely larger than ourselves.
I have stories of awe and wonder every day. Like like it's not like awe and wonder is not like exceptional in my life.
Our guest in this episode of Constant Wonder is Rue Mapp. If you had asked me a couple of months ago about her, I'd have said, Rue who? But now that I know her, I kind of want to stop total strangers on the street to talk her up. I want everybody to meet this person who has such a profound sense of beauty and awe and wonder in the world.
Actually, it happened today. I introduced my new horse to my retriever, Boogie. So True and Boogie met for the very first time today. I didn't know how this Mustang was going to react to a dog, but they were just so curious about each other and calm. And it just reminded me of just the power of curiosity and how curiosity, it's calm and it's an opening. And I saw that between those two creatures.
Rue Mapp is not just a role model for how to be closely attentive to nature. She demonstrates how to put your whole heart and energy into celebrating and loving and caring for nature. And to do any of this, you simply gotta get outdoors. She is the founder and CEO of Outdoor Afro. Outdoor Afro is a not-for-profit network that Rue describes as helping to change what it means to be Black and connected to the outdoors, and what it means to care for the planet. As she invites Black people to thrive in outdoor environments, some of whom may not have had much previous exposure or access to the outdoors, it's not just about helping individuals line up individual experiences, although those are undoubtedly very important. Well, Rue is fired up about the social benefits of what she does, the value of group and community ventures out into nature, whether it be to ski or swim, hike or climb, to garden, or even just take a much-needed stroll through the park. Of all the many people I've met on this podcast who actively support getting outside and caring for our common home called Earth and finding spiritual refreshment in the natural world, Rue is a standout. Her accomplishments are impressive. A little later, I'm going to tell you how Outdoor Afro began, including details about her inspirational family of origin. But first off, just to give you an idea of her reputation. In 2012, the Root magazine designated her one of the most influential African Americans in the country. 2 years before that, she was invited to the White House in conjunction with America's Great Outdoors Initiative. In 2015, she was appointed a voting commissioner of the California State Parks. She's a National Geographic Fellow. And in 2021, she launched the Black Heritage Hunt. That's a duck hunting event in Sacramento, California, to encourage Black hunters. And she's author of Nature Swagger, Stories and Visions of Black Joy in the Outdoors. In highlights from a conversation I had with her for Constant Wonder, you'll learn how Outdoor Afro was sparked by a simple question put to her by one of her mentors, and why this kind of work matters so much to her. You'll get a sense for Rue's generosity of spirit, her family heritage of hospitality, the importance of hunting in her life, which even I, a non-hunter, can understand and appreciate, and for the awe she experiences in her encounters with creation.
There was this lovely synergy between our Oakland home and our ranch home. There was a lot of food we grew, and that food would be brought back to Oakland.
She's talking here about her childhood.
It would be brought back preserved or packaged. Sometimes it needed more time to cure. So it wouldn't be unusual for there to be a hanging animal carcass in the garage before we were going to do more processing. And it was absolutely mortifying if the garage door was open and the school bus drove by, which happened.
You just were a decoy. You would just kind of try to guide eyes away from what the family was doing. Huh?
I know. I'm like, nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. But there's it ties into, not only was I like a first generation Californian with my parents coming from the South, but they were also from a different generation. And sometimes it was a bit embarrassing, if I'm honest, because when you're a kid, you just want to blend in. You don't want to stand out.
And yet now, with Outdoor Afro, you are encouraging people to cross the boundaries of comfort zones all the time. I have to wonder if it's kind of, do you get any resistance from people who just can't cross those boundaries or put themselves out there?
I think you nailed it, Marcus. One of the things I do as a practice is that I'm still pushing my boundaries. So this is something you don't know, but I just bought a horse like last week.
Oh, my producer is smiling here.
Breaking news.
Tenery, yes.
Breaking news. Okay. And not just any horse. I got a Mustang. That's a horse that's lived wild and free.
Yeah.
That gets a whole new lease on life. And so there's something really special about Mustangs. But that's a really big leap for me. I had quit horses for several years. And I got on a horse back in 2018, did a trail ride. And it was just, just a silly little trail ride. I wasn't thinking much of it. And looking back, there were so many things that went wrong. We were in a group of maybe 5, 6 riders. And we were just, going along the trail, just walking pretty slowly, nothing serious. Then there were a few riders on that ride who was like, hey, we want to go faster. We want to canter.
I know those people. They push me far beyond the speed I'm comfortable with.
Well, the instructor or our guide said, sure. And next thing you know, all the horses are taking off, going up a hill into a canter. So for all the horse people out there, you guys, all of your lights are going off. You're like, whoa, beginner riders, canter. Like, some things you just don't responsibly do. It's dangerous. And sure enough, I was on the ground in seconds because I lost my seat. I was totally out of rhythm with the horse, and the horse's back end was going up. So I'm on the ground. And, thankfully I had a helmet on, and I'm checking to see if I had all my teeth. After that, I was done with horses. I was like, I'm not going to do that again. I don't want to take risks with my body like that. Falls are not easy to recover from as you get older. So I was done with horses. And then finally, I was like, and this is alongside, some ambitions I have for Outdoor Afro. We want to acquire land for Outdoor Afro. As much as I love our public lands, I do want Outdoor Afro to have like a base camp where people can come and learn and be in community the same way that I did on my family's ranch. And I started to look at and really visualize all of the elements of that. And horses are a part of that vision. They have to be a part of that vision. And then I really sat with myself and I'm like, yeah, I'm afraid, but I can't let fear be a governor in my life. And how can I ask people to go and do a 1-mile hike who, someone who might have no experience, might be really intimidated, because there's something about the word hike that stresses people out. I can't ask people to do things that make them uncomfortable if I'm not willing to confront those things that I'm uncomfortable doing. Outdoor Afro didn't invent Black connections to nature. And given the background that I had, I found that there was this kind of tale of two, there was perception and there was reality. And the perception was that Black people didn't have a relationship with nature, didn't do certain things in the outdoors. And I was just like, huh? Because based on my experience, that was absolutely not true.
Rue is making an important observation here about a very common but imprecise view of Black American culture. It's a consequence of the Great Migration during the 60 years stretching from 1910 until 1970, when over 5 million black people left the rural South, moving primarily to the urban Northeast, Midwest, and West. Far too easily, Rue insists, we conceptualize black connections to nature as having been abandoned during this era, or we entirely forget just how strong these ties to the land once had been in the black American consciousness. Her own family background belies the notion that if you are a black American, you're automatically alienated from wild places of nature, from country life, and from outdoor experience. I want you to hear some of her own family backstory, and then we'll highlight some of her efforts to promote hiking and nature walks, and water sports and hunting and fishing and gardening and every imaginable delight of having contact with the riches of nature. Her family story does in fact include their leaving the Jim Crow South as part of the Great Migration.
My family is not so unique in a lot of ways because a lot of Black people who found themselves in California migrated from the South. And it was during, this great migration that happened in the United States, and my parents were a part of that migration from both Texas and Louisiana.
Rue is passionate when describing the role model her father was in her life. He came from a family of landowners in Texas. Like several others from his extended family, he, together with his wife, joined in the Great Migration by moving to the West Coast. He was one of 12 siblings.
Not everybody came. Some remained and still remain generationally to this day as landowners, ranchers. He had that background. My mom also grew up on a farm, a bit more modest in Louisiana.
So were they looking for a better future than they had back in the South?
Absolutely. I will say, my dad in particular was so ambitious, and just wanted to be able to do more. Let me just, set the table a little bit more clearly that this is the family that adopted me. Because when I was born, they were in their early 50s. They were much older than parents of, biological range. It some pretty interesting perspective to have parents so seasoned and established in life by the time I came on the scene. They were of the silent generation. I'm a Gen X. And so I was able to get so much wisdom. And there was a term that was used in our home called motherwit. Meant that, it's not about your academics that make you super smart. It is about your common sense, your intuition development, kindness, your connection to the spirit, They would tell me, they're like, yeah, you can get all the book smarts you want, but you won't go far in life without some motherwit.
I like that so much. I can't even begin to tell you how much I love motherwit.
Right? I mean, it is a real ethos that I was raised with.
Having found a new home in California, in Oakland, Rue's parents were able to acquire ranch land far out in the countryside. This was near Clear Lake, which gives its name to Lake County, California. It's over 100 miles north from where their city home was in Oakland. The classic city-country divide was really not such a big challenge for the family. After all, you can bring home wild game to butcher in the garage if you have the know-how. Rue has written this: "At my father's ranch in Lake County, gardening, fishing, hunting, and animal care were not survival tactics. They were expressions of abundance, joy, and community. For generations, Black people have had productive, joyful, and deeply rooted relationships with the natural world. Outdoor practices were integrated into daily life duties like tending to the land, raising animals, fishing in familiar waters, and gathering communally." In Rue's case, because she was so much younger than her parents, they were in a season of life essentially beyond their working years. Well, that gave them lots of leisure time to make excursions out to the ranch.
Yes, he had a hobby farm, about 14 acres, and we would drive there almost every other weekend and longer periods in the summertime. And what was really special about that place was not only the bountiful garden that would grow all kinds of vegetables. We always had collard greens going and tomatoes. Abundant fruit trees. We had several different varieties of grapes. My dad actually made his own wine. And it had a English walnut orchard. We also had cows, pigs. We had a horse named Chinook. And it was also a kind of base camp for my dad to pursue other activities such as boating. He loved going fishing for crappie and catfish in Clear Lake nearby. But he also hunted pheasant, deer, quail, and I learned much later because he's been passed, since 1997, and I had posted a picture on social media of me hunting, and a longtime family friend's son, who I hadn't seen in years, replied and said, "Oh, you're keeping up the tradition of your father because he helped me take my first buck and taught me how to break it down." And I was like, wow. Like, I don't think I was present at that time. It was just our way of life. I didn't appreciate how he mentored others.
It
Yeah.
sounds like in addition to the mother wit, you got the father savvy.
Yeah, for sure. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she was very industrious. She had her own sewing business, was the president of the sewing circle at church. She was making all the dresses and prom dresses and wedding dresses for folks in the community. And my dad, by trade, was a carpenter. And he was able to learn those carpentry skills by working at the Morse shipyard in Oakland, California, in that time of, economic boom. So it was just really fascinating. And I feel incredibly privileged to have grown up with folks who, were able to make a really good living with pretty limited education, but with a lot of grit and hard work and discipline and just putting their hands on things and especially putting their hands on the land. And so I had this front row seat for how to live that way that felt ordinary. So I grew up with so much can do. It's such an honest way to grow up when I look back on it. And the other piece about the property up in Lake County is that it was the site of hospitality. They loved having people come over. And it didn't matter if people called in advance. It didn't matter. I mean, I remember like a guy from the car dealership just happened to be in town and he knew the address. He had sold my dad a car. And, looking back, he probably wanted to, stay close to his potential customer. But I just thought that was so interesting. It's like, we didn't know this guy, like, as a family. And he dropped by and was totally welcomed, to have dinner with us. So it was always somebody coming by. We didn't have a television up there for several years. We didn't have a telephone. It was just a lot of time being together. Even if we go into town, because we have to stock the refrigerator, if we ran into another Black family, because there weren't that many Black people up there, we would make friends with them and they might show up for dinner that night. That's the kind of hospitality
Yeah.
that my family had. Really great relations with everybody in town, even though there weren't a lot of folks that looked like our family. There was just a lot of respect for my dad and mom. And he wasn't, a man about public life. It was so much about the family and creating that place of joy and safety for the family. That was his priority.
So, Rue, as I've been listening, now I want to step back a bit and tell you that your life strikes me as being such a tapestry of so many threads,
It is.
beautiful threads through this. That has to do with family. It has to do with hospitality and community. It has to do with agriculture and knowing the land and knowing the water and being on a boat and going hunting. One of your themes in this tapestry is the beauty of silence.
Yeah.
And sometimes that silence has to do with being alone. And some people who grow up in cities with a lot of people don't know how to be all alone for very long.
Yeah.
As you're 5, 6, 7 years old, did you know how to be alone up there on the
I
farm?
did. It inspired a lot of creativity in me, as well as adventure. And, it would be absolutely nothing for me to go, you know what? I'm going to get on my bike. I'm going to get on this county road and ride, a few miles down to my neighbor, Lynette, and to see if she can play. And if she couldn't, I'd ride on back by myself.
So when a friend like Lynette wasn't available for good company, I'm going to guess that you got to spend a lot of time alone outdoors too. And well, how did that go for you?
There was a tire swing I recall distinctly, and it was under this huge oak tree. And I'd be on that for long stretches of a time. I would just, sit there swinging on the tire, being in my own thoughts. And then, there was time alone also in Oakland as well, where maybe I didn't have the kind of nature escape, but I would, this is the kind of kid I was. I would literally spend hours studying the yellow pages.
What for? What on earth for?
Because it was interesting. It was something to do.
Let's reflect again for just a moment on the all-too-common stereotype that Rue has been debunking now for many years. It's the idea that black families haven't got much appetite for the great outdoors. Well, in her own experience, as you've already heard, spending a lot of time outside was absolutely part of her family culture, both before and after her parents moved from the South to the Bay Area in California.
It was true that people, once they migrated to urban areas, lost connection because it wasn't an easy thing to do anymore. Your lifestyle didn't depend on it anymore. You could go to the local store and buy all the produce and meat you wanted, and the expectation or need to grow it didn't quite exist. So with a different set of pressures and urban realities, people had gotten away from those real traditions that existed in, I would dare say, most black families up until maybe the 70s.
I'm very intrigued by Rue's analysis of how this modernization played out for black families and communities during this era of the Great Migration and the subsequent years. When you think about it, the cultural shift that urbanization demands of people, well, that shift can happen for anyone of any color when we're confronting that juggernaut so often called progress. From time immemorial, actually, urbanization has been championed, mostly by city folk, I would say, as the way to go. Just think of the musical Oklahoma and its song, "Everything's Up to Date in Kansas City." But the disruption of something as epic in scale as the Great Migration, well, that was some force to be reckoned with. This all meant, of course, a shrinking and sometimes a full abandonment of the agrarian way of life. How did the pressure of progress affect Black America?
Progress doesn't feel like dirt, doesn't feel like sleeping in a tent. It feels like hotels, resorts. And I think there is a thread of distancing oneself from those agricultural roots to signal progress. My goal with Outdoor Afro was about, and I'm deliberate in always saying, reconnect. So where there's been a disconnection, let's reconnect it. And let's reconnect it in a way that makes sense for your life right now. Do I want you to become a full-time farmer? No, but you know what? You can probably do a lot with a few containers on your porch. So I really have worked over the years with Outdoor Afro to create right-sized amounts for people to be able to choose ways to get reconnected.
Still ahead, what Rue Mapp really means by a healing hike. Also some words from Rue about how time spent in nature can bridge chasms where progress has actually fractured and fragmented our society. We also have in store for you a snapshot that will explain some pertinent background on that recently acquired Mustang. By now, you've probably got a good sense that Rue is the scrappy kind of person who, after falling off, gets back on the horse. There's more on this theme of resilience on the way, too. This is Constant Wonder. I'm Marcus Smith. I've worked with lots of younger kids, including my own, and I know firsthand the great feeling of finding just the right kind of educational listening for younger folk. We've got a podcast perfectly suited for younger hearts and minds. It's the Constant Wonder Kids podcast. Stories from the original Constant Wonder podcast featured in a way that's totally accessible for children from about kindergarten age until they hit middle school. Many of these episodes are adventure stories out in nature with fascinating people who go out into the wide world to see its wonder and awe. Curious, developing kids love this podcast, as well as the grown-ups who guide and love these kids. True stories about ocean divers, bird scientists, volcanologists, non-experts who rescue animals and rewild and replant damaged habitats. Positive stories about people doing positive things for the world. Would you like to get inside the mind of a bee, or find tiny hummingbird eggs, or go in search of seahorses? Maybe discover amazing ways that some plants can think and communicate. Constant Wonder Kids is perfect for road trips, bedtime listening, maybe just for whenever your brain's got an itch that needs to be scratched. New episodes drop on Mondays. Tune in to Constant Wonder Kids on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. We now return to Constant Wonder.
Her name is True.
Several days had gone by before I clued in about her new horse's name. True is Rue with a T.
I was able to get True from someone who had her for a 90-day Mustang makeover, completely broke her and got her to the right level of abilities to match my riding abilities. And she's 6 years old. The average age of a Mustang in the wild is about 6 years old. They don't survive. There's not enough water. There's not enough food. And a very, very small, lucky few get captured and are able to be adopted. And that process is not an easy process, and it's fraught with a lot of policy and advocacy. But there are far too many Mustangs on our public lands than can be sustained.
True had survived to the age of 6 out in the Twin Peaks herd management area that lies along the California-Nevada border in the American West. Well, surviving for many more years in the wild in this animal's case would have meant beating the odds. Not impossible, but her days were numbered.
If she remains sound and if I remain sound, she can be the horse that I can ride for the next 20 years.
Rue has held the reins, directing Outdoor Afro, for close to 2 decades now. All along, her guiding principles have included the idea that connecting with nature is just as valid in groups as alone. Also, that it doesn't require going far away to remote wilderness areas, and doesn't demand lots of time away from home, because nature is local.
People will come at me with these statistics and they'll say, 0.001% of Black people have ever been to this, insert national park or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, because, it's about 4 hours to get there from where people live. When you look at the lives of just busy working families of any hue, where are they going to get that kind of time to prioritize, to go someplace they've never gone before, to not know what's there, to not know who all is going to be there, what the food is going to be like? I mean, there's a lot of yeses that we have to get through before people can take on these. So yeah, if you've got a full-time job, you're taking care of grandma on the side, you're running to soccer practice, you've got church, you've got all of these things going on in your very full, busy working professional life, it's a big ask.
It is a big ask, but you also have such a generous definition of what nature is that
Yes.
you don't. Sometimes we think something has to be really exotic. I have to go 8 hours to get down to the Grand Canyon or up to the Tetons.
Right.
Define for us, if you would, your concept of what nature is.
One of the things I did early in Outdoor Afro's development was did a survey, and the number one reason why people weren't getting outside was time. And so we set out to amplify and invite people into opportunities that they may not have thought about. Like, I'm a big champion of the neighborhood walk. There's something about getting outside close to home in the same place over time that really, like, you notice what's in bloom this time of the year. You get to know your neighbors. One of the first things I like to do when I move into a new community, and I did this when I moved back to Oakland with my kids after living in a community we really loved and felt very attached to. I was like, I don't know anybody, and nobody had brought the welcome wagon over to me. So I put together a little flyer and it said, "It's nice to know your neighbors." And I had a picture of me and my kids. And we invited people to come to our front porch for some lemonade and cookies. And people came. And people had, like, they were like, no one's ever done anything like this. But I'll tell you, like, it changed everything for us. It changed everything for my kids, especially because, they knew which houses had kids. We discovered someone who had backyard chickens and were very generous sharing their eggs with us. Outdoors is the ultimate open source platform.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about being on your own porch, your own neighborhood, describing those right at home activities as outdoors. Of course it's outdoors. But we so often we say the words outdoors or nature, and then there's a temptation to quickly default to, all those connotations. You're far away somewhere, probably pretty isolated from other people.
Nature, to me, is the most open platform that doesn't regard differences between people. It doesn't discriminate between people in the way that we discriminate against each other. So there's a leveling, there's a way of finding connection with other humans across our perceptions of difference that nature provides us. And it is some of the most liberating and freeing part of the work.
So outdoors for Rue might be a porch, a pool, a park. It might be near or far, alone or together. She referred to it as open source and an open platform, which of course is digital and internet tech speak, applied by her to natural environments. The openness she advocates for, well, that goes back to her father's legacy of having a wide open door to most anyone, even the guy you only got to know because he once sold you a car. When I asked her for a personal, first-hand example of how being in a natural environment is conducive to humans connecting across their differences, well, she went straight to the following memory. It's about something she'd never accomplished before, which was actually taking down a deer with her own hands on a rifle.
It was my very first time having this experience, and it wasn't going, I wouldn't say it wasn't going well because it's hunting, right? Not catching. Animals do what animals do. But we were, stalking, we were glassing, looking through binoculars, trying to figure out the best approaches, trying to figure out exactly how the animals were moving. It took us like 3 whole days. We were on our very last possible day where we could make this happen. And it was the last hour of shoot time, which means that the sun was going to be going down within the hour. I'm a little stressed out, and I'm sure he felt some stress too as my guide. Every guide wants you to be successful. Sure enough, there were some deer that came into view that were on the move to go to wherever they were headed to that night for their deer party. And I shot one, and it face planted one shot from 250 yards away. At first, I wasn't sure because, we're losing light by the second. He picks up his binos and he looks and he lowers them just so and turns to me with this 1,000-megawatt smile. This guy, the total opposite of who I am probably in regular life, gave me not only the biggest smile, but the biggest hug. He was with me in that moment of joy, of completion, of an incredible milestone of something we set out to do together. And I notice it a lot, this leveling of difference in the hunting world in general, because our priority when we're out in nature is obviously to stay safe and to keep each other safe. That's number one. And we want to be successful. And there's also something about folks who hunt who want more people to continue hunting because we want to protect that legacy. We want, the laws to remain favorable to do so. So there is a kind of welcoming that I experience in these settings that include all kinds of different people. But when we're all together in nature with that goal, we're all on the same team.
I want to go back to the theme of getting back in the saddle. You've already heard about Rue doing that literally, but there's a back-to-school story that you need to hear because it coincides with a decision that Rue made in 2009, which was absolutely pivotal in her life trajectory. I'll let her give the main details, but it fits right here in our episode because this was the juncture, the moment, when her resolve arrived to set her sights on a grand cause that eventually took shape as the Outdoor Afro organization, and which eventually led to her book titled Nature Swagger, Stories and Visions of Black Joy in the Outdoors.
I was divorced with 3 children who were young. I had not completed my undergrad degree because I started a family, in my early 20s and didn't know how I'd get back into academic life. And by then I had a mortgage to pay and just didn't know. And it always felt like that part of me was missing. I worked at Morgan Stanley and everybody had degrees. So I definitely felt a fair amount of pressure and inadequacy. So I longed to get that done. And it was not until I got divorced where I was confronted with, you know what? I need to make sure all the check boxes are checked. And I knew my kids were going to depend on me. So I went back to school at night while working full time.
Rue's performance as a non-traditional student was stellar, and that got her admitted as a transfer student to UC Berkeley.
I lived in family housing, which was magical for me and the family to have a community that nurtured us in our very unique circumstances. And then toward the end of that experience, the economy didn't look anything like it did when I came in.
She's talking about the economic recession that began in 2008, which was challenging for people globally, and she was not spared the pain. She graduated in art history in 2009 and had set her sights on grad school, but that suddenly seemed out of the question given the rough economy. Feeling lots of pressure and uncertainty about her next best move in life, she decided to talk things over with a trusted mentor.
So she's like, hey, Rue, if time and money were not an issue, what would you do? And I always characterize that moment as opening my mouth and my life fell out. I said, I'd probably start a website to reconnect Black people to the outdoors.
Sometimes, at certain rare moments, a light goes on in a flash. It went on for Rue, and she wasted no time. Within 2 weeks, she was working up a blog to promote her ideas. Blogs, of course, being, back in the day, a perfect platform for something unique like this.
I was off to the races, telling stories just like the stories that you and I are talking about today, about my family, about growing up in nature, about the things that I was continuing to do with my own family, starting with telling those stories. And importantly, people chiming in saying, that's my story too.
In her early blogging days, before she set up Outdoor Afro as an organizational structure involving more people, Rue found herself proceeding with considerable caution. For example, when going camping, only infrequently did she see many other Black people also camping, and she found herself thinking about the potential risks of interracial tension. But the appeal of her blog was immense, so much so that within just 2 years she found herself at the White House as part of the Obama administration's America's Great Outdoors initiative. The value of Rue's vision of Black Americans thriving in the great outdoors, well, this came into particular focus for her soon after the killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. That was in 2014. That event was a moral flashpoint, yet another reckoning with the deep racial divisions in the United States. In her hometown of Oakland, people began preparing for civil unrest.
It felt like we were in this cycle of news that involved violence. People were taking to the streets and protest. And Oakland being, a hotbed of activism for as long as I can remember, was just gearing up to be active in voicing its concern, its anger, all the feels. And I'll never forget, like, I'm going to my car and the helicopters were overhead. Stores were already boarding up their windows with plywood. I'm a mom of 3 kids, right? And and I've always said, like, I've aged out of like getting arrested. Like, I don't, like, I have to go make dinner. But here I am, though. I'm like, what is it that I do as a Black woman and leader of an organization that's championing getting Black people outside? What do I do? How do I show up in this moment? And the answer came as clear to me as anything, saying, you do nature, Rue. That's your lane. And that weekend, I reached out to some local outdoor Afro volunteers, some of our partners, and we did our very first healing hike. And we met up in the redwoods that atop Oakland, California. People don't know that Oakland has redwoods as well as some of the famous ones around the state. The sempervirens only grow in a particular climate, and they love fog, and they represent so much about resilience to me. So that's one of my favorite areas to go. And so it was about 30 of us who got together. We started off in this bowl, this beautiful meadow area, and we just did some breathing, set some intention about how we wanted to be together. There was no like helicopters overhead like I heard in that parking lot, no sound of plywood getting put on windows. And we just started just going down into this trail area, into that bowl, further down. And I could just literally feel the stress falling off of our shoulders. And we were laughing with each other. And there were different generations there. There were different points of view there. But we were all like just feeling connected to each other. And I realized that we were doing what Black people have always known we could do, and that is to lay down our burdens down by the riverside. That's spiritual that we've grown up with in the church. I'm going to lay down my burdens down by the riverside. And we were living that in that moment. And there was just something that felt so generationally connected to that place. And we had a closing circle up, and each made commitments about like what we were going to do in our sphere of influence to affect the kind of change we wanted to see in the world. And since then, we've made healing hikes a part of Outdoor Afro. So people do healing hikes for all kinds of things. It's now been over 10 years. And it's not about therapy. It is not about prescriptive action. It's about saying, come out in nature and heal. Come out in nature and get your joy. Come out in nature and get your community. And, looking around, our society today, we still need to be doing healing hikes, probably now more than ever, to find our way, to find our connection, to find our center, to find our connection between not just ourselves and nature, but with other people, to get ourselves equalized and rebalanced, to calm our nervous system, to help us put down our phones and turn off our screens. Outdoor Afro is going to continue to stand for that. And I've always said, we're we're lovers, not fighters. We're not here to weigh in on the issues of the day. And there's been many issues of the day these past 17 years. So I'm always interested in letting folks know, like, okay, if you go and protest, come back to Outdoor Afro to get your rest. And that's what I always want to be for people, is the place of rest, refuge, and connection, and to learn something, build confidence in that learning, and transform how you live for the better.
And invite other people to come along.
And invite other people to come along. Absolutely.
Working to produce constant wonder, I find that part of the joy for me is learning what makes people tick. The best guests on this podcast always inspire others. Where does that ability, that attribute, come from? With Rue, part of the equation is a steadfast conviction that she has about the human need for some kind of spirituality. And there's a vitalizing religious perspective that she has inherited from her parents. I think one of the reasons that I'm so very on board with her efforts to get people outdoors is quite simply because I'm the kind of person who never ventures outside. Doesn't matter if I'm somewhere in the backcountry, hiking or fishing, in my yard or garden, maybe just walking around the neighborhood, without the persistent voice of constant wonder talking to me. And this is what it says. It says, Marcus, keep your eyes and ears open because you might just bump into God around the next bend. Well, here's how Rue talked about her own theism at its intersection with the human experience of nature.
I'm a Christian. I was raised in the church. There's a whole lot I can say about how the church also helped uniquely prepare me to be doing the work that I do, and how I see it as our obligation to be stewards of creation, right? When I see the transformation that people have, it is absolutely a spiritual one. And, the role that one might assign to me is maybe that of an evangelist. I was thinking a lot just recently about Jesus and how, if you notice throughout the New Testament, Jesus is constantly dipping out, going to be by himself. And of course, the iconic wilderness story, right? Where he was tempted. But the garden, the wilderness, sites of transformation and inflection, but also for rest and solitude. And I just think about once the word got out about what Jesus could do, how he could heal, people were just constantly, and the crowds were growing, and he would leave and go be by himself in nature. So that's why, I'm not saying that's precisely why I do it, but it's a model for me for how I can fill my cup, going into nature and spending time with these animals, whether it's I have chickens in the backyard or walking my dog Boogie around the block. It's how I fill my cup. It's also how I am able to get closer to God.
I'm not going to end this episode without one more example of what she means. So here is one of her memories from duck hunting. And by the way, I wasn't really on my toes as an interviewer when she shared this story, because I really should have followed up asking if she plucks and dresses her ducks with an open garage door there in Oakland where all her neighbors can see.
Usually you only see a piece of a rainbow. We saw the whole thing in a perfect arc over our duck blind. I just felt like that rainbow was just for me, but it wasn't. It was for everybody. And that's the beauty of being in places like that. It can feel so personal just for you, but the knowingness that it's for everybody brought me so much joy. And I just hope more people saw it. I mean, it was God's promise. Like, I was like, woo! Like, that was like, oh my gosh. And that is God's promise. It is personal. It is personal. But it's also for everybody, right?
It was an honor to meet and visit with Rue Mapp. She's the founder and CEO of Outdoor Afro. And as I mentioned, she's author of Nature Swagger, Stories and Visions of Black Joy in the Outdoors. Outdoor Afro is a not-for-profit organization supporting Black connections with nature. Every year, tens of thousands of participants benefit from Outdoor Afro's work, which involves guided nature experiences and the promotion of historic representation of Black people recreating in outdoor spaces. Please don't forget that personal recommendations are key in our effort to make a difference in the world here with Constant Wonder, with our stories and our featured guests. We welcome you to write to us anytime by email. The address is constantwonder@byu.edu. I'm Marcus Smith. Constant Wonder is a production of BYU Radio. I'd like to introduce you to another show from the BYU Radio family of podcasts, The Lisa Show, hosted by comedian, believer, and single mother Lisa Valentine Clark. The Lisa Show delves into most any challenge that meets us in the course of our lives, especially challenges in the realm of human relationships, whether it's parenting, mental health questions, or social issues. Lisa and her council of moms are willing to tackle it. Figuring life out is vexing enough without losing an ability to laugh or cry together or just plain talk things through. The Lisa Show. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.